chill of fall makes people start thinking about the cold months of winter ahead. For pollinators in Georgia, cold months mean either dormancy or migration, and they need to have plenty sources of nectar available to survive either. Pollinators are incredibly important to our ecosystem because they pollinate flowers.
My name is Emily Lasky, and I'm the Assistant Conservation Horticulturalist at the State Botanical Garden of Georgia. Pollinators are animals such as insects, birds, bees, bats that carry pollen from male flowers to female flowers. And because plants can't move by themselves, they can't do that pollen transfer directly. And so over time, plants have adapted to attract pollinators to take that pollen for them. And some plants have adapted other ways to move that pollen, like through wind or through the air. And that works pretty well for some plants, but about 90% of our flowering plants need pollinators in order to reproduce. And because plants are the basis of all of our ecosystems and food webs, that makes pollinators really important. Pollen is a very fine, sticky substance that contains the male DNA of that plant. And pollen is what's transported from male flowers to female flowers to basically fertilize the eggs in female flowers. So flowers have structures called stamens. Those are the male parts. And then at the very tip of the stamen, there are the anthers. And the anthers are what produce and hold the pollen. And that's kind of what our pollinators brush up against or collect pollen from when they're visiting flowers. Nectar is a sugary substance that is produced by plants, and they might produce them in the flowers, and they might also produce them outside the flowers on the leaves or the stems. The ones they produce in the flowers, that nectar is to attract the pollinators to come and help spread their pollen. The ones outside the flowers, that nectar is for attracting predators to keep pest species off that plant. So it's a mutualistic relationship.
From spring until fall, there are plants that are flowering, providing pollen and nectar to pollinators.
Plants over time have developed flowering times based on when it's been most optimal for pollination, for avoiding competition with other plants, as well as for responding to environmental stressors. And in the day-to-day, plants know when to flower based on things like day length or temperature or water or nutrient availability. And over time, over millions of years, plants and animals have been co-evolving and creating relationships with each other to help each other get food resources and reproduce. And so over time, our pollinators have actually influenced factors on flowers like flower color, flower timing, and even nectar composition.
Fall is one of the best, most underestimated times for a gardener.
The vast majority of our native perennials are very adapted and used to the winter time, so there's no danger of them overwintering outside or in the ground. That's what they do naturally. And planting them in the fall helps them have time to develop strong, healthy root systems. And these root systems, when they're healthy, will help them through environmental stress like drought or heat or nutrient availability troubles. So just giving them more time in order to produce that system is really important.
While colder seasons like fall have less of an array of flowers, there are plants that aren't pollinator food but are utilized by other insects and animals. Fall blooming plants are vital sources of nectar for pollinators. Here are several species of plants that produce flowers with late season nectar for pollinators to enjoy.
Purple coneflower is a native perennial, and it's visited by butterflies and bees mostly, as well as some other insects. And purple coneflower is really well known for being a seed source for songbirds. So after it's done flowering, goldfinches especially really love those seeds. So if you leave the seed heads on, that's ideal. Coneflowers have stems that are a little bit hollow, and some bee species use those stems to overwinter or to even put larvae in for their nests. Goldenrod is visited by a plethora of butterflies, bees, moths, other insects. and it's a really essential food source in the late season when there's not a lot else flowering, and it is also just a beautiful plant to have around. So some fall blooming flowers that I would highly recommend for pollinators are goldenrod and asters. So those are the prime two that a lot of our pollinators need in their late season foraging and in their migrations down south. Climbing aster is a perennial vine or sprawling plant that occurs a little bit lower south in Georgia and in Florida, and it is bursting with flowers in the fall. It's a pretty late flowering species, and it's visited by all sorts of pollinators. The biggest are bees, butterflies, moths, and other lesser known insects. Georgia aster is a late flowering plant, and its primary visitors are bees and butterflies and moths, but you might see other insects on there like flies and beetles. Georgia aster is a really rare plant in Georgia, and it only exists here, and it is only found in a few counties throughout Georgia, so we have made a lot of efforts to collect seed and propagate the plant and spread it where we can. So when we recommend what people should plant in their gardens, we like to tell them that pollinators need food and resources year-round. So what you should do is try and plant a few species that bloom in the spring, and a few species that bloom in the summer, and a few species that bloom in the fall. And that way, in your space, you're providing something for them to eat year-round.
Planting flowering plants is a way you can provide ample food sources for pollinators, who play an incredibly important role in our ecosystem, pollinating our flowers and our food.